The biggest mistake you can make is holding the wrong players right now, guys whose value is about to collapse. And if you wait until week one, it's too late. These are the 5 players that you need to trade away today. And if this is your first time here, I'm Joe. I've done over 1 billion views in sports over the last decade. But more importantly, I've helped thousands of people just like you win their fantasy league. The way I structure these videos is always the same. First, I start every video with the top NFL news stories, and then I tell you why they matter for fantasy football so you're up to date. That's just a way for me to deliver some value right off the bat. And then I answer my 5 favorite YouTube comment questions from yesterday's video just to reward some positivity, and also smart questions in every video help all of us. And that's also a little bit of an engagement hack for me because the more comments that I get, the more that YouTube will boost this video. And then I jump into today's one key topic, aka the reason that you clicked. The goal is always to deliver on every single click, so feel free to skip ahead if you need to. But let's jump right into today's news. The first thing that we have to talk about is all of this Kyle Pitts trade buzz, which is really heating up. The Falcons might be shopping Kyle Pitts if things go south before the trade deadline. So he's in his final year of that rookie deal worth about 10.8 million. And some other teams have already kind of been sniffing around that in the past. I guess the big question is whether Penix and Pitts click early this year, because if not, Atlanta might want some draft picks to kind of restart instead. For fantasy, you're still drafting him as like a low end tight end one. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's catching passes somewhere else by November. Maybe he's one of those guys that does just kind of need a fresh start. We will see. We talked about Jalen Coker yesterday, and today they put him on the IR. Kind of a bummer. Quad injury. This is like right after they kind of told us that he was going to be that slot option after Adam Thielen was traded away. But the Panthers did go ahead and sign Hunter Renfro to fill that need. Interesting. Brings some experience. It's going to fill that depth right away that they need. And for fantasy, I think the bigger impact is going to be the opportunity for Xavier Legette. I think he's poised to kind of slot right in as the wide receiver too, with Coker sidelined. I think Renfro, he probably mixes in a little bit, but Legette's the one that I think sees a real bump in targets here. So monitoring this one pretty closely. And then we got to talk about the Patriots. All of this buzz around Travion Henderson. I've been a big part of that. He's one of those guys that I've been targeting in every single draft. But reports are saying that the team is absolutely ecstatic with him, which is good news for me and everyone else that's been kind of watching the content all off season. They think that he could even take over as the lead option, not just on third downs, but possibly half of the backfield work or even more. Again, great news for a big play threat like him. Late fourth round ADP looks pretty cheap at this point, guys. I'm in on this. I'm still in on it. Basically, if he gets that lead back volume, that's a lot of upside for a guy that you can get later than a lot of other guys, kind of in that archetype, in that role. Matthew Golden, this breakout might happen soon. Rookie wideout Matthew Golden might already be Jordan Love's new favorite target. He's already been starting alongside Dobbs in the final preseason game. And then obviously Watson, Reed sidelined with injury. So he's getting a lot of opportunity to build some chemistry, which is huge. This kid had a pretty massive camp. I feel like we heard his name constantly. So if he's like the true wide receiver one there by week one, I don't think anyone should be surprised. He's been kind of flying under the radar a little bit. You can draft him at about a wide receiver 4 range. But this is exactly the kind of guy who can blow up early and just never give that job back. So you'd love to see that. Let's talk about Rashad White. That backfield is an absolute mess. But let's actually, this is the Javonte Williams news, so I am out of order here. Rashad White, little preview for the Javonte Williams news next. White is back at practice. It looks like he's on track to suit up against Atlanta. Bowles is saying that he wants to get Sean Tucker more involved. So when I said that the backfield's kind of a mess, it's more because we keep hearing Sean Tucker's name. Bucky Irving still reportedly getting the pass catching work. I think he's still totally fine in drafts. I haven't ended up with a ton of Bucky, believe it or not. I do think Rashad White is mostly just a stash at this point in PPR. He's kind of hanging on by a thread from a value perspective. So if either Bucky continues to take more work or even someone like Tucker takes off, it's hard to see a path where White holds on to the volume that we are used to seeing through the passing game for at least very long. So that's my concern with this backfield in general. Buried the lead, not necessarily the lead, but Javonte Williams gets the week one start. I guess the question is for how long? The Cowboys officially named him their starter. Definitely not all sunshine and rainbows for the Javonte people. Looks like he's going to open the season. Still going to see a lot of Sanders, still going to see a lot of Jaden Blue kind of mixing in behind him. So unless he flashes a lot more bursts than he showed last year, I think this one becomes kind of a messy committee pretty quickly. I think Sanders isn't one of those guys that we need to roster. We kind of know what he is at this point. Jaden Blue is the one that I think is kind of like the sneaky stash in this backfield if you did want to go there. Let's get into some YouTube comments. Bunch of them today. I really appreciate you guys kind of jumping in here. This is probably one of my favorite parts about like doing these new videos is like interacting with you guys a little bit more in the comments. So I appreciate all the nice, kind words. And then the other people, get out of here. Just kidding. You're all entitled to your opinions. I see on Instagram all the time. I think Jacobs will be top 5 this year. That's awesome just to see that some Instagram people made their way to the YouTube videos. Like that is like a pretty big goal of mine. I would love to have some of you people that watch the short form videos get to know me a little bit better in long form. That's definitely one of the goals of these videos. I think I was hearting some of my favorite questions. Oh, let's just go to the top. Cool. Darnell Mooney or Amari Cooper. This was an interesting one, actually. At my first glance, I didn't think it was that close, but I have both these guys right around pick 100 in PPR, my latest rankings. I'm going to break ties, I think, with the better, more explosive offense and go Darnell Mooney. I think Darnell Mooney is still the guy that I want to stash, getting more access to that Atlanta offense, deep play type of guy. I like Darnell Mooney if I had to pick one. If I had to pick one, but that is a good question. I think they were literally right next to each other in rankings. These trade ones have been kind of interesting too. So would you trade away Odunze for Tyler Warren? Full PPR redraft. And then this last part kind of threw me off. So I currently have Kittle as my starting tight end, but we're trying to trade for Tyler Warren. I was a little bit confused by that. But I guess Odunze, I have him like around 65 overall right now. Love Warren, but he's like in the 90s for me. So especially if you have Kittle, I would not be making that trade, my man. I like the Odunze stuff this year. I think he's still kind of priced effectively or efficiently, I should say, but he's still a guy that I'm not scared to grab. Damn, just came across this channel, 1 billion views and still using a child's format. That was a hard watch. My 8-year-old could do a better job on presentation. See, like, this is the type of testimonials I'm talking about, guys. Just great stuff from Brett here. I don't think he's trolling, though. What do you think about me trading Josh Jacobs and Lamar Jackson for Joe Burrow and Chase Brown for the receiving stack that Chase Brown racks up with their horrible defense? I think it'd be a good trade for me. What are your thoughts? Again, another one that I had to kind of look at for a couple seconds because I thought it was super obvious. Looked a little bit closer. It's closer than I thought. So basically, Chase Brown and Josh Jacobs, roughly a wash, I think. If you're just looking at rankings, roughly a wash. So the question is basically Lamar versus Burrow, which to me is pretty easily Lamar. Even with the correlation bump that you're getting with Burrow and Chase Brown together, and I'm a big correlation guy, I still think that Lamar and Jacobs would be the side that I would prefer. Hope that helps. Would you rather have, in a half PPR league, Terry McLaurin or George Pickens after the Micah Parsons trade? So yeah, Micah Parsons gets traded. The defense for Dallas obviously significantly worse. Do we see more shootouts or more, I guess we need more offense, that sort of thing. Yeah, I love George Pickens. I'm a big fan. I have Terry a few spots ahead of Pickens in my half PPR rankings. It's a little bit more skewed in favor of Terry in full PPR, but they're in the same tier. So at cost, I think I still like Pickens better personally. And I know that like that's kind of like a cop out because Terry is a few spots ahead of him. But if I'm just standing there at the draft, I just haven't taken a lot of Terry this offseason. The regression on the touchdown department still worries me a little bit. And I'm just trying to get as much of this Dallas passing game as I can. So hopefully that helps. I guess that's one of those situations where I don't just purely go off rankings. It depends on the rest of my roster. But yeah, I'm trying to get as much Pickens as possible, my man. Should I do this trade? I give Patrick Mahomes and get Alvin Kamara. They give Bo Nix and Achane. So the best player in this deal is Achane by a mile to me. So this is the deal I would do personally. It comes down to like the positional scarcity, right? So I like Bo Nix. I also think Mahomes' ceiling is kind of higher than people realize just because they're going to be trying to throw the ball downfield a little bit more. I think they could kind of give him the keys a little bit more this season. The defense is just so good. He's so efficient. They're ahead in all these games. Like I just like the rushing upside that we get from Bo Nix. And then it just comes down to Achane versus Kamara, which is pretty obvious. I know that Mahomes and Bo Nix are pretty far apart still in drafts. I just prefer upgrading at the running back position and still being strong at quarterback, if that makes sense. So that's how I would look at that trade. Cool. All right. If I didn't get to your question today, good time to remind you that I do have a membership community called the Fantasy Accelerator, where I do answer every question as well as give you everything you need to win your league, even after the draft. Check it out at fantasyaccelerator.com or hit the first link in the description. It is a 365-day membership. So check it out, see if it's for you. If you're not ready for the draft kit yet or the full draft kit, you can still get my top 150 rankings totally free at top150free.com. You just toss in your email right here. It's the exact list that I'm still using in every draft this year, and you can get it absolutely free. There's a link in the description for both of those things. But let's jump into our one key topic today. Today's one key topic. If you've been enjoying kind of the whiteboarding stuff, I might actually let me know in the comments what you guys think. I think there's a way I can share this so you guys could still zoom in and check things out that we're talking about, just a way to check back on some notes. But let me know if you guys would be interested in that. Cool. 5 players you need to trade away before week 1. Players to trade away before week 1. You'll regret not trading away before week 1. The whole deal. That's what we're talking through today. Guys that I'm actively trying to trade away basically now before week 1. And it's always hard to kind of break ties on guys that you just drafted, but this is kind of a big opportunity to make some not necessarily lopsided trades, but in my opinion, I think there's still opportunity to gain some value before we get that ultimate week 1 reveal. The first guy I want to talk about, some people are not going to like, it's Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is a trade away for me right now, depending on what your league mates think of him. So if they're still holding on to what he did the end of last year, you can get a lot for Jonathan Taylor in drafts. So this is one of those ones where I would kick some tires. And here's some of the reasons why. So to me, it comes down to 4 things. We're really lacking some PPR safety. That's really ugly. Let's do this. Let's go a little bit lighter here. Much better. PPR safety is a bit of a question mark. Daniel Jones being the starting quarterback, this is something I have talked about. As my camera crashes, that's fun. The goal with these videos is to not edit. So let's see if I can get that to turn back on. We still here. All right, if you've made it to this point of the video, drop the timestamp in the chat while I unplug my microphone and plug it back in. Just realized I said microphone. I meant camera. So we are back in 3, 2, 1. We are back. I'm not editing that out. I'm leaving it in. Technology is hard sometimes, guys. Okay. PPR safety. I recognize that Daniel Jones being the quarterback here now does significantly help his receiving upside. The problem is I just don't think it's still a very high upside through the air. Only 18 receptions last year, 48th in the NFL. He did have 303 carries, which was 5th. So that you're basically buying rushing volume alone with basically a cap ceiling. So the cap ceiling is the reason that I still think that you could probably get more for him than he's probably worth right now for someone that maybe just missed him or someone that got knocked out in the fantasy playoffs that played against him last year, that sort of thing. So running back 9 finish. But to me, it still feels a little bit fragile. It doesn't tell the whole story, if that makes sense. For Gile, to me, the running back 9 came on the 321 touches, 89% of the backfield share. But if that touch monopoly even softens a little bit, his production could slide a little bit. So we've seen some efficiency, but the receptions just falling off every single year. He had 40 receptions a couple years ago, 19, then 18. The usage just tilts away from that stable PPR floor that you kind of need at a round 2 price tag, which is where you're going to have to take him. So even if you're talking about offensive, are we optimistic at all that this is going to be a team that blows the doors off this offense? I guess I don't think so. So you're capped by even some touchdown ceiling here too. And then we talked about it a little bit before, but that late season heater. What do we think about that? Is that a situation where wheels up the next year, Or did we just completely forget how painful it was to own Jonathan Taylor for most of the season? So, like, if you got to the fantasy playoffs, you maybe didn't even have him anyway. So, you didn't even get to, like, basically take those ceiling weeks, weeks 15 through 18. Like, that's what everyone remembers. But it's really like recency bias in some ways. Four straight 100-yard rushing games, six touchdowns over that period. A lot of breakaway runs, big plays. Like you can picture it if you just close your eyes, literally. But I'm worried it's a little bit of recency bias. That's my concern. So at a round two price tag, it's really, do we put him at like a safe floor, or is it really just kind of like trap territory, right? So they do have a tough passing schedule in general. So that's one side of things, to where if he does get like consistent work on the ground, that's a good thing. My concern is still like the durability though. 3 straight years he's missed games. This ankle injuries in running backs, for whatever reason, kind of freaks me out. So I think if your league mates are willing to pay like a running back one price for that name value, I think he's a trade away option for right now, especially in full PPR where his receiving role is a bit muted. So since I don't know if a lot of people are going to agree with me on that one, another staple of guys that we've been fading. So for some reason that you did draft Breece Hall, he's a pretty easy guy, I think, to try and see what you can get before the bottom completely falls out. Because I think it will. Or at least the ceiling is questionable at the very least. So let's talk about Breece Hall. You can get him in the fourth round now. Basically like the end of the third, beginning of the fourth. So to me, it's really just like the new regime. We're basically like looking at like the Detroit backfield now, right? Which is a complete split. This Detroit backfield, right? Completely different types of roles. So it's possible that it's even worse than like this 1A, 1B situation that they keep talking about. It's definitely a possibility, especially with how this team might end up being behind a lot, right? Or if this team just goes super run heavy, you never know. Like this is one of those situations too where it's another team that's not expected to score a lot of touchdowns. The Jets are basically going to go from last to first in rush attempts, so more carries, that's good. But not all of it's going to be guaranteed. So like we're looking at like the Gibbs Montgomery role, right? So Hall is clearly Gibbs, and then Allen is like more of the Monty role. So if we lose some of those touchdowns or some of that stuff around the goal line, that's a big hit to his value for a team that's not going to score a lot in general, right? And Justin Fields, I've heard some people say that his target share to running backs is very high. I can't for the life of me find where you guys are talking about. So if you have a source for that, I would love to read it, but everything I'm seeing is that his target share is not very high. So when he was with the Bears, 21.7% of his targets went to running backs, but the Bears itself, 25th and 24th in running back target share. So to me, that's not a clear positive for backs as a receiving game. And then just looking at the guy, he's more likely to check it down to his legs, essentially, if things are going bad, right? These running quarterbacks typically don't check it down a ton to running backs. So, and that's kind of been the backbone of Hall in general, right? It's that receiving ability 171 targets, 131 catches, 7 touchdowns in the receiving game over the last 2 years. So, even if he ends up being like a true part of this offense through the air, like, do we really believe that he's going to be like the number two passing option behind Garrett Wilson? I don't know. That's a hard one for me. This is one that's easier to get my head around. But his efficiency, when I think about Breece Hall, everyone talks about him just being like this absolute freak guy, like athlete, right? Like just an efficiency guy, but that really hasn't been the case. His yards per carry has dropped from 5.8 to 4.5 to 4.2 over the last 3 seasons. So it's really gone down. Running back 17 last season, despite number one in routes run, number three in running back target share, and the heavy usage like didn't really give him like crazy fantasy results. So the efficiency didn't lead to results last year. And do we really think it's going to be that much better of an offense? We'll see. So to me, the question is he even like a trade? Is he like a sell low? It's another one where I think you should kick some tires to see if you can find someone that still values him as like that second, third round asset, because that's one of the situations where I think you can get some name value right away. But this name value basically disappears right away if he gets off to a slow start, right? So it's something to think about. This Jets offense in general, I'm just not a big fan of it outside of Justin Fields. So our next guy we're going to talk about, we're just going to move right into Garrett Wilson. This is another guy I think that you can trade before week one and still get some nice name value and a nice return, but the bottom is going to fall out pretty quickly. So let's talk about Garrett Wilson. So just objectively, right? This is one of those offenses where I'm trying to have as few shares as possible, if that makes sense, right? As few shares as possible. And if you're trying to pay a price tag like this for Garrett Wilson, you're going to have to take him at like basically the middle of the fourth round. And that's essentially where he's come in terms of like his ceiling. His floor is like very close together, right? So you're drafting him with not a lot of room for upside, in my opinion, in that range. If he was like a fifth, sixth round pick, you have some room for upside. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Like we're paying a wide receiver two price tag, essentially. So let's wide receiver two price tag. And what you're getting out of it is basically a wide receiver who's cleared 1,000 yards in every season, but he's never cracked the wide receiver 20 in points per game. That was a crazy stat to me. Like we think of him as like a much higher upside guy, in my opinion. But in terms of points per game, it doesn't look that great. His yards per catch have also declined in 3 straight years, signaling kind of like a shrinking big play profile, in my opinion. The one, I guess, thing to talk about here is the Jets do have a pretty soft passing schedule. So that's one of the things I'm trying to keep in mind here. So if Fields ends up locking onto one guy, we have seen him elevate in the past. So these are the type of things that you should, in my opinion, be using to your advantage when you're doing some trade negotiations. But to me, like this elite volume that we saw last year, similar to Breece, it's led to pretty mediocre results. He had 153 targets, which was fourth in the NFL in terms of overall targets, but just 1.71 yards per out run. That was 56th. 7.2 yards per target, 80th. So, like, pretty pathetic in terms of what he actually did with his volume. He basically just survived on the volume last year. So, the QB swap is, we should probably talk about it. Very different quarterbacks, Rodgers versus Fields, right? So the QB swap, what do we think about this? Justin Fields, 18.2% inaccurate throw rate to wide receivers, third worst among 39 qualifiers. So if you want to be on the side of this is just DJ Moore 2.0, I'm not sure if that's fair. I think they're very different. They're very different. Obviously, they still have some connection from Ohio State, but I still think that Fields is more of a cap to Wilson's series ceiling, I should say, than something that's going to unlock it. And then we just talked about it with Breece, but the Detroit system is pretty run heavy. And we think this is going to be a pretty run heavy team in general. So to me, paying this type of price tag for a guy that you're basically capturing, like, I guess you're very hopeful that he can get back to the floor that he had, but the ceiling is lower than people realize as well. So that's my problem with it overall. Two guys left to talk about today. This one is not a Jet. James Conner. Let's talk about James Conner. I think there's some people that are not going to like this video, but here we are. James Conner. So we've already talked about it, but AZ, similar to what we were just discussing, they basically want to have a 1A, 1B situation here. They've already said that, right? They've talked about having co-running back ones. And some of that is coach speak. Some of it might not be, right? People forget that Benson was drafted pretty high not long ago. He's added a little bit of weight. They're saying he looks explosive, all that good stuff. But honestly, if the usage like follows all of this talk, I'm a little bit worried about some of the early down work here that gets a little bit more of a split. So I think there's a lot of room to like kind of rebalance his backfield with how much James Conner touched the ball last year, but he's still priced like last year. That's the main thing. He's still priced like last year. So at the end of the fourth round, you want to feel pretty good about this guy, especially if you don't think he has a ton of upside and he's entering his age 30 season. He's already said to the press that he knows that Benson is going to be more involved. He basically told us. He's already told us. So if we're just ignoring those signals, I think that that's a little bit of a mistake. Also, this offensive line is not very good. I feel like the Cardinals haven't had a good offensive line in a while, but I would say it's like maybe not bottom 5, but bottom 10 for sure, which is only going to hurt the running backs and this run game in general. So we're worried about the split, we're worried about the offensive line. And last year, like we talk a little bit about how some teams went super run heavy towards the end of the year. So Tampa comes to mind. Arizona kind of went the other way. They went pretty pass heavy towards the end of last year, like after their bye. So I'm not really counting on a ton of like rushing volume, I guess, overall. And then I think you could probably end up still like just playing up the fact that he's been so reliable, because that's definitely true. So if you have an owner in your league that needs some running back depth, you could probably get third to maybe early fourth round value for this guy. If you're just flipping for someone that's like a little bit more unproven, maybe you have a ton of running back depth that you feel good about, but you need a little bit more upside and you can swap Connor for some rookie wide receiver. Something like that's the fourth round is just littered with upside from wide receivers. So I think where the trades make the most sense with James Conner is trying to flip it for a little bit more of like a high upside wide receiver, because I don't think the ceiling is super high if you were just to put these guys right next to each other. I think if reliable is the word, I think that's okay, but that's not really what I want from a fourth round pick, if that makes sense. Last guy we're going to talk about today. Any guesses? He's a wide receiver who changed teams this offseason. He's a wide receiver that used to be a top 10 pick. He's a wide receiver that has struggled with injuries. He's a wide receiver whose old team basically left him for dead. And now he's a wide receiver you can get in the 8th round, but I'm not going here. If you for some reason drafted Cooper Kupp, I think there's still someone in your league, some casual, that might be willing to give you a much better return in a trade. So if you're looking at Cooper Kupp, people still want to remember the ceiling. It's a new offense, all of that stuff, but the age cliff is real, especially at wide receiver. And I think we already saw it, right? Last 7 games that he's played, including playoffs, 18 catches. I'm going to write this down because it's that crazy. 18 catches, 252 yards, and it's absolutely crazy. Like the declining amount of like yards per game. So 59.2 yards per game is the fewest since his rookie season last year. So that's in 7 games, guys. 7 games, 18 catches for 252 yards. Just crazy. 10.6 yards per out run was also a career low last year. So it's really the juice that we just don't have here anymore. It's tough. It's tough. The camp buzz is something we should talk about. So that's where you got to sell this. Like you're selling the name essentially. They're talking about how he's still really hard to cover, or that Seattle's moving him pretty much everywhere. All of that, right? So the early season kind of memory from last year was like he was still having some games like 70 plus yards, right? So you're going to anchor to that, not necessarily the end of it, just enough to like sell the bounce back story. I think if you're trying to tell, if you're trying to get some value for him or throw him into a bigger deal that you're trying to make. The role is interesting, right? So let's talk about the role. The role, and then I guess let's also tie in the environment overall that has changed. So I think that there's just a really cap ceiling here, right? So he's basically a slot dependent player at this point, right? If you're looking just at his yards per out run, obviously much higher than the outside. Last year, another career low in yards per out run on the outside. So if we end up seeing like more 2 tight end sets, like Kubiak's going to do that. Like if this team runs a lot, which they're expected to do, we might see like a little bit more blocking from Cooper Kupp and definitely fewer high value routes, right? So another thing that we should probably talk about too is just the pace of this offense. Wow, I cannot write today. There we go. The pace of this offense. I haven't heard anyone really talk about it yet, but Seattle was like a bottom 3 pace team the second half of last year. So they're really trying to just like limit opportunities in general in those games, right? And then for a wide receiver like this, it's not as important. But this offensive line is so bad that it's worth still bringing up that the efficiency for the offense as a whole, to me, is going to be a pretty huge downgrade from where he was in the past, right? They have a pretty easy passing schedule, but to me, I would sell the name if you can. He's like the perfect player to kind of package in like a 2-for-1 deal if you have another guy that you want to move to, um, just to try and get a little bit of name value here. But I think you can kind of sell that he's looked really good in camp, all of that stuff. And the fact that you got him in the 8th round, it is kind of like an add on player to probably a bigger deal. But there's a story you can tell yourself here where even in the 8th round, you might have already wasted a pick, in my opinion. So if you want my round by round draft thoughts next, check out this video right here. Hit subscribe. See you tomorrow.